This is Movie Geeks United. Tonight we're discussing one of our greatest actors, Mr. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Sadly, we're discussing his legacy tonight because yesterday he was found dead at the age of 46. Much too soon. He's been taken from us. But tonight we'd like to celebrate his contribution to the art of acting and the world of film and stage. He was a really accomplished stage actor, too. And I'm joined by Dean and Jerry both. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
This is the second actor in a row. I mean, we had Gandolfini a few months back that taken from us just way too soon, and both incredibly accomplished actors that you felt like only kind of scratched the surface.
I'm still sort of kind of in shock a little bit, about it, because I came in yesterday from the movies, in a pretty good mood, and then seeing this news, immediately, I just kind of threw myself into writing a remembrance of him, to keep my sanity about me in some ways, but yes, an incredible, immeasurable loss.
It's not like when River Phoenix died and Heath Ledger died, where we knew there was, you had someone of the body of work, and you knew that there were great things were going to come from those two. Here we knew we had 20-plus years, and we knew there was probably another 20, 25, even 30 years. Just this year alone, there are 3 movies coming out that, I'm looking forward to seeing, but it's not going to be. It's going to be a different, obviously, way of viewing them. I really can't. I'm still like Dean. I'm stunned.
Well, and he's definitely one of those actors, one of those very few actors where you say to yourself, "Well, I'll see him in anything." And there was actually Saturday night, a friend of mine. We were in conversation, and Saturday night he said, "Yeah, I'll see Philip Seymour Hoffman in anything. He's the one actor that I look forward to seeing in anything." And then hours later, he was found dead. So, for people that love movies, obviously for the casual viewer as well, that I'm sure knew him because he very adeptly kind of towed that line between supporting and lead actor throughout his career. But for people that truly love movies, he was one of the seminal actors. And considering his output, it is jaw-dropping how versatile he was. You put Flawless, which is a tremendous performance, like his first lead performance in the Joel Schumacher film. You put that against something like Capote. That's not the same person.
We just look at another important point. You say Flawless, and what does that come out along with Magnolia and The Talented Mr. Ripley in the same time period? The same month, if I'm not mistaken. It's amazing, and he did that. He did that every year. Something like Happiness and Patch Adams, or it was always he would have 3 or 4 different roles in the span of a couple of months, and they're all completely different.
When I first saw him, I didn't like him years ago when he did Scent of a Woman, basically because I didn't know what he was capable of. And it's a testament to how good he was, because I just saw him as that completely arrogant, spoon-fed character, and a tremendous gutless weasel in that movie. And I was thinking, oh God, there's something about that guy I just don't like. And so I never expected he would be this actor of such depth and versatility and warmth and humanity that he showed, throughout the years since then.
Yeah.
But eventually, obviously, he became a big favorite. And every movie I saw of his, and we would talk about each movie since we've been doing this show, it always came up that Philip Seymour Hoffman is just great. It felt like a Meryl Streep kind of thing. Well, of course he's great. He's Philip Seymour Hoffman.
But you bring up that greatness, and, I really had to, stop myself yesterday, because I went back and read this review I'd written when Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. And I had, I haven't seen it in quite some time. I had forgotten what his character, and just reading about what his character, an addict, and some of these performances like Love, Liza, or even the one that you mentioned yesterday, Jamie, Oni Mahoney, he was an expert at playing characters with really deep-seated addictions. And now we know great art comes from a very dark place. I mean,
the first time I heard about his addiction problems, which was a few months ago when he went into rehabilitation, before the Devil Knows You're Dead was the first thing I thought of, because obviously that's a heroin addict that he plays in that movie, which brings up another point. He's, I said something like he wasn't afraid to play the unflattering, and by saying unflattering, essentially I'm saying human. The human, that the person that just wakes up out of bed and isn't made up, or the guy that's a complete disappointment for others and himself, or the guy, he wanted to kind of plumb those depths. There was a fearlessness. Even if you look at something like Doubt, where that performance is a complete high-wire act, because did he do it? Did he not do it? And you look for the little indications in the performance, and you can go either way with him. And so he's just stunning. You automatically feel a warmth towards him, but in Doubt, there's also always that nagging suspicion.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about him playing Scotty in Boogie Nights, because that was the first. I'd seen him in Twister and in Heart 8, but it was in Boogie Nights and Cinema Woman too. Although I have very little recollection of that film, but the performance in Boogie Nights was the thing that really grabbed me. That I said, well, we're going to see a lot more of him, because he took that very small role and imbued it with so much. I don't know. There was a mixture of pain and loneliness, of course, and a big dollop of loneliness goes through almost his entire career. Almost all of his, many of his characters, but have an incredible loneliness. Even if they're still fully engaged with the world, there's still that sort of maybe a little bit of solipsism to it. I don't know, but definitely a lot of pain in that performance in Boogie Nights, and just that sort of sense that the guy can't even get clothes that fit right, or can hardly even speak a sentence. He's so crippled with this confusion about his attraction to Mark Wahlberg, and of course that scene where he makes the advance to Wahlberg and is rebuffed and still trying to show him his new car. You want to go for a ride in it, and then just his complete breakdown behind the wheel of the car, calling himself an idiot. And then after that, you see something, in the year after that, you see something like The Big Lebowski, where he's just hysterical and kind of like, again, there's a certain sort of loneliness there, because he's got a job dealing with a very difficult, boss, but he's completely devoted to him. But yet they're living in this sort of cloistered lifestyle in this mansion, and really you can feel that Brandt has nothing. His character in Lebowski has nothing to really hang his whole world on except dealing with his charge, and but he makes it. He shows all of that stuff, but it's also incredibly funny, in the sense that he's just such a sort of sickening toady in that film, and so phony, like so hilariously phony in a lot of those scenes, particularly in the scene where he first meets Jeff Lebowski and shows him around. There's just so many little details in all of his little scenes that are just, fantastic. I mean, the film is filled with lots of details, but you just single out his performance in that, and just every single move he makes, every wince, every sort of tensing up of his body as Jeff Lebowski is investigating all of the pictures and everything. It's on Lebowski's wall. It's just amazing, and just also incredibly physical, like I remember in Lebowski that great moment where Hoffman opens the doors to Lebowski's inner sanctum or whatever, and with this just great, huge sort of wild, overly dramatic kind of here it is, thing that he does. It's just great. So I mean, he was able to make you laugh as well, and with all the little details. But of course, a lot of the things that he did throughout his career were things that really made you kind of either wince or just kind of want to break down sobbing.
No, of course.
Well, he did all but 2 of P.T. Anderson's feature films, There Will Be Blood and the new one, Inherent Vice.
Right.
So, and P.T. Anderson gave him, obviously, he and P.T. Anderson hit it off with Hard 8, and he kept returning to him and gave him such a gallery of different characters.
Right.
And I really think that The Master is just kind of like the ultimate cap on that collaboration. I mean, sadly, it has to be the cap on it, but it is a masterful performance, and he's performing across from someone in Joaquin Phoenix.
It's a powerhouse duo. I mean,
it really is. But he, Philip Seymour Hoffman is really like a stabilizing force. And as soon as I saw him in that movie, I was so taken with his voice. He had such a commanding, clear, bass-toned voice, and it made me think of like the other characters that he played. The completely opposite kind of voice that he puts on for Capote, or and it's I don't know what exactly his process was in terms of how much the external determined what the interior life of his characters were, because every actor has a kind of a different process with that. But I mean, it was like you said, Dean, it was the physicality and the vocal characteristics and all of that stuff that just made him so vivid and different in everything. But I think about The Master, and there's another high wire performance as well, just like Doubt, because he's a man of great presence in the movie, and he kind of commands your attention. And yet, he could quite possibly be a complete kook and a fraud.
A fraud,
yeah.
And an empty shell.
He toes that line there too.
Often you don't know whether he's I mean, there's that scene in The Master where I guess it's Jesse Plemons playing his in that movie.
Yes.
And there's that scene where Jesse Plemons says, he's just making it up as he goes along. I could fall asleep right now and not miss anything about what he's saying, because and so you do spend a lot of the movie wondering, okay, is there anything to this? And that's kind of where a lot of the drama of that movie comes in, because it's also up to Freddie Quell to decide. But also, what's interesting about The Master too is the fact that that Hoffman is able to portray, even with all those doubts that we kind of come into the movie with. I mean, we all knew that, at least the most studied of us knew that it was a movie that was kind of based on L. Ron Hubbard and so forth. But you know what's interesting about that film is that a lot of what the character Lancaster Dodd does for Freddie Quell actually works. it actually does help him go to another plane to get over a lot of it that.
Well, they need each other.
Him.
They kind of need each other. They need each other. I mean, I think. I mean, because I do think. By the end of the movie, I mean, there are scenes where Philip Seymour Hoffman looks exasperated dealing with Freddie. I mean, he's not, and rightfully so. But he does say to him at the end, says the most important thing in the movie: if you can find a way to live without a master, you will be the first person in the history of humanity to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like he's almost wanting, saying, look, if you can do it, more power to you. And I always felt that was quite a last line.
But you talk about the supporting performances are incredibly vivid and lived in. Moneyball was that for me. I mean, here he's playing the baseball coach, and I've always said about him in that movie, he didn't have to open up his mouth. He just appeared on screen, and you knew he was that guy. Talk about exasperated and world-weary and just tired of living. I mean, that's what you got from that character. It was just a beautiful performance, like this jewel of a little performance in that movie.
Oh, it's a great little movie. I didn't even know he was. I mean, they kept saying in the trailer he's in it, and you don't see him at all in the trailer. And you watch the movie, and when he is that, when he's on screen. Like you said, he doesn't have to say anything. You just know his presence is just
and
there.
His expressions at Brad Pitt, like, what the hell are you doing to me? Like I can't take much more of it.
You're killing me, man. You're killing me, Pitt.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to say anything. It just all transmits in his face.
I went to NYU back in '86, just for a couple of semesters, and I made a lot of great friends there. And one of my friends that I met there is named Gary Sherwood, and he's out in California. He's working as a screenwriter and as a DJ and radio DJ and so forth. Anyway, he let me know, learned through Facebook that, and I remember him talking about this too in the past, that he and Philip Seymour Hoffman were actually classmates together in an improvisational class or an acting class. And I was curious about his remembrances of Hoffman, and so he wrote this. I'm going to read it. He said it was the spring of '87 semester, and I tell everyone I wouldn't have pegged him for an acting student. He wasn't a pretentious artiste in black. He was big, and I thought he was a football player. But in every class exercise, he had that same level of commitment you saw on screen. I remember there was one exercise where we were instructed to make our acting partner do something against their will. Of course, all Phil had to do was stand full height, raise his voice ever so slightly, and take a couple of steps forward. I remember his partner scrambling backwards and almost tripping. I never really got to know Phil or his good friend Bennett Miller, for that matter, and God, I wish I did. Anyway, I never really thought much about Phil until 7 years after graduation, and I'm in the theater seeing Twister, and who should appear but one Philip Seymour Hoffman as a welcome comic relief in an otherwise lame movie, and I've been a fan ever since. So I thought that was an interesting movie.
That's nice. There's another film though that I think really and he's missed from this other director's films, and that's Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
He's superb in Happiness.
Talk about a character that I can't really imagine many other people agreeing to play. The bravery of playing some of those scenes in that movie.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong in saying this? I've seen every movie except I think Dark Horse by Todd Solondz, and I think after that you realize that kind of performance is missing from the later films, I think. That's just a daring, bravado, creepy, unsettling movie, but his performance, I think, is the personification of the whole movie. I think you don't have he just sort of embodies everything that movie to me represents. It's like sort of like, to me, that's always been like the standout indie gem of the mid-'90s, or late '90s, actually. And
definitely the standout of Stallon's career, I agree.
I mean, it's because the others, you look at the other ones that come after it, and it's just sort of like he really has dug himself into this hole he can't get out of. He's all, I hate to say it, but the later films almost feel like parodies of themselves. And
they don't really have that kind of heart that those performances that like Jane Addams and Philip Seymour Hoffman and even Dylan Baker bring to that film.
Right.
You know, I mean, like none of the other films have an ensemble like that, and particularly, they're missing somebody like Philip Seymour Hoffman. A lot of Stallon's movies tend to feel a little heartless, and the thing about and yes, it's true. I am being kind, but with someone like Hoffman in that role, it's impossible to feel like there's no heart in it.
Right.
So,
and you consider, I mean, you think about Scent of a Woman and Twister, two of his first kind of movies, and you think this guy could have easily been, like you said, Jerry, typecast, and he could have been typecast as the smart-ass Belushi kind of guy.
Right.
You could have seen him playing a version of a frat boy in every movie. When in fact, I mean, obviously it was a lot more, the career path he took and the choices he made were a lot more complicated than that, thank God. But, and then you see it, just my favorite comedic performance of his is like a really kind of forgettable romantic comedy, that Along Came Polly movie, which is generic.
He's hysterical in there.
He is funny, and it's like as far as you can take that kind of frat boy, pretentious, thinks too much of himself.
He's one of the funniest lines in the movie. I mean, I just burst out laughing when I saw that. When they have to leave the party, we have to go. I started. We have to leave. We have to go now. I was on the floor. Because you're right. It is a forgettable. You think but when he's on screen, it's hysterical. I mean.
Yeah,
you can't stop laughing.
That little basketball game that they have where he's yelling out little things while making the basket, like "old school," and then the thing bounces off of the backboard. That's pretty hilarious. You know?
One of my friends, Tim Williams. Since Dean, you read a little recollection of him. He wrote this today. He said, 3 years ago, a good friend gave me the opportunity to not only meet one of my heroes, but to spend an entire evening sharing his company over a poker game, several cigarettes, and 2 20-ounce cans of Red Bull. The most significant thing about that night was that once the shock and awe of being in the presence of the most gifted character actor I've ever seen since Gary Oldman, Philip was just one of the guys. There were no costumes and lights, makeup, or script, no romantic aura of celebrity or pretentiousness. Philip was a deliberate and soft-spoken man for most of that evening. We were playing poker after all. He radiated an underlying intensity that drew focus not because of his celebrity, but because of his quiet strength and a reserved calm, broken only by his passionate and animated contributions to our conversations. He just said he was incredibly human, and he would talk to him about the joys and fears of being a father and how proud he was of his theater company, and he expressed a burning desire to dabble in cable television. He shared music on his iPod with the enthusiasm of a high school boy introducing a brand new band to his friends, and he refused the liquor being consumed during the game by telling me he'd been sober since graduating college.
That's wow.
And you got we talk about this a lot. We talked about this with Gandolfini too, that both of them in some way, I mean, kind of a larger than life talent, but they never abandoned their kind of, you felt like you were them, like you knew that person. They never, because it was in their DNA. They couldn't get rid of that. They were every man, you know.
One of my favorite one of my favorite performances of his that, again, from a P.T. Anderson movie, but, that performance as Phil Parma, the hospice worker in Magnolia.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, so you got this 3-hour movie and there's 10 million people in it, and half of them it's like half of SAG is in this movie. And then here is this guy who really most of his scenes are performed pretty much alone. They're either on the phone or he's talking with Jason Robards as the old man that he's dying TV producer that he's taking care of. And, a lot of his performance is listening, and he even makes listening into something that's powerful. Trying to gather what words the man is saying and what he's asking for, and then also being on the phone and trying to convince a worker, a telephone worker, to do something extraordinary for him.
Right.
That scene where he's trying to convince that worker, he says, "This is the scene in the movie. This is the scene." That scene is ridiculous. And then, when the frogs start falling in the movie, I think, that reaction shot of Philip Seymour Hoffman turning and looking out to the pool behind the house, and he's like, "Oh my God, they're frogs!" the tears in his eyes and the incredible shock on his face. I mean, that's an amazing performance too. Also because it's one of the only performances in the film, one of the only characters in the film that just seems actually truly giving from the heart.
Right.
Well, that's what I saw an interview with him, and they were reviewing kind of each movie in his career, and when it came to Magnolia, he started to get emotional, and he said that movie and that character just destroyed me because he's all about giving, and so he felt like a real sensitivity to that character. That was a special one for him, I know.
That was a truly heroic performance. One of the few real heroes that he's played in the movies. Who's just really trying to do something pretty extraordinary. There are others. There are other heroes that he plays, like Lester Bangs and Almost Famous.
Oh, he's great in that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's fantastic in that too. I mean, again, this is a guy that could just lighten up a movie, the entire movie, just by being in 2 or 3 scenes.
And never more so than something like something that could have easily been a throwaway, like a Mission Impossible 3. And I'm thinking, when they first announced that casting, I said, "What? Philip Seymour Hoffman is doing Mission Impossible 3?" I was like,
yeah.
But, it was another kind of delicious change of pace for him that I'm sure he embraced being a part of.
It almost makes you wonder. It almost makes you wonder, what it might have been like if he had been in something like a superhero movie or something, like how Paul Giamatti is cast
doing Spider-Man
in the new Spider-Man. I was like, what would have Hoffman been like in one of those movies? He would have certainly elevated it. He
would have been very good. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he would have been. But what's really the other is, I mean, it's all very sad. But he was a great director too. I really thought Jack Goes Boating was a great little movie, and that would have been great to see some more things that he directed. Because that's a film that's not really talked about a lot, and it's got some great performances in it, and that's something else we're not going to get to see. Because I was always hoping he would direct something else.
He's obviously he's a stage director as well, so he had plenty of experience, and probably that was probably something that he might have been saving for us, in some ways,
He was about to direct his next movie. He just cast Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal in it. So he had, everything to look forward to. There's also, I regret never having seen him on stage because I'm friends with someone on Twitter and we've communicated here and there, like just briefly about movies and stuff. I mean, not in depth, but just through retweets and comments and that kind of stuff. But
right.
He directed Philip Seymour Hoffman twice. He directed him A Long Day's Journey into Night, which for Broadway, and he and that's a performance that Philip Seymour Hoffman said was the toughest for him. He said that almost killed him. And then he directed him, I think, in Othello, maybe something else, but I read an interview with him yesterday, and he said, he was a guy that did not drop character. He knew no other way but to kind of exist in that skin throughout the duration of it. And he was there through the whole 4.5-hour Eugene O'Neill play. And
that's just a long one. Yeah,
it tortured a lot out of him. And then I think the one that I wish I could have seen was the Mike Nichols production of Death of a Salesman.
Oh, yeah. I wish I had.
At first it seems like, isn't he too young to play Willy Loman? But you think about the reserves of loneliness and disappointment and anger that he had, and that's Willy Loman. I mean, it makes total sense for him to play Willy Loman. It was he and Andrew Garfield in that production that Mike Nichols directed on Broadway last year, or 2012. That must have been mammoth.
That's the interesting thing about his performance in The Master, too, because he seems to, without benefit of any makeup, really, he seems to have aged, like maybe a couple more decades than we were used to seeing him. So something about the cut of the hair and the mustache and so forth, and just the we're also kind of used to seeing him in kind of rumpled suits and or clothes just in general, and clothes are, he's very good with communicating a lot with just the clothes that he's wearing, like in Boogie Nights or like in Lebowski.
Or Charlie Wilson's War. I mean,
Charlie Wilson's War is just, yeah.
But that's those suits that he's wearing, and the way he wears the suits in As Lancaster Dodd in The Master. That's another thing that sort of just instantly can age him in a way. So he was able to use all of those tools that come from other artisans too to his best advantage. Yeah, I mean.
And you just rewatched Schenectady, New York today, right, Dean?
Yeah, Schenectady, New York just tore me up. Because, you're watching it and you're like, I haven't really revisited it. I love the movie, but it's a difficult film, and so I hadn't revisited it in a little while, and watching it here, I say, man, there's so much of him in this movie. I mean, so much that he put into this movie that really came from, I mean, it even has him, he played Willy Loman in college, or what I've read, and here it is in Schenectady where he's trying to stage a production of kind of a sort of a disastrous kind of production of Death of a Salesman, or at least overly ambitious, I guess. Because there's a scene in it where he says, "Yeah, there's 600 lighting cues," and which is an absurd number of lighting cues for a play. But there's so much of him in that film that you can feel him pouring his concerns about his own mortality into it, about his body kind of falling apart almost, and the concerns over his family and being separated from them, and just the sort of like trying to get your arms around a artistic endeavor that almost seems outside of this character's grasp, at least, and really going the extra mile to get it perfect. All of that stuff is in Synecdoche, and I think that's absolutely who he was. I mean, you could just feel it by just the commitment in every performance he did. This is that person. He is that person. It's not often that a celebrity death, just an artist's death, just completely floors you, and this is just one of those. This is one of those instances that's just it'll just never. It's always going to be a wound, and that's just never going to heal over. But the greatest thing that we can say is that I mean, for 2 decades of work, that guy just churned out almost nothing but great work. I mean, I can't even point to anything that I would say was bad in his entire career, and that's just something that you just can't say.
So if you were to recommend one movie to watch for our listeners in memory of him tonight, what would it be?
I would definitely watch The Master or Synecdoche, New York. Definitely. Those are the. I mean, it's interesting also to go and take a look at his, more supporting performances too. But those 2 performances, I think, are so key to who he was and his range, and I also think they're 2 of the greatest movies, but also Magnolia. I mean, frankly.
And Jerry, what about you?
I would take 2 supporting performances: Charlie Wilson's War and The Talented Mr. Ripley. 2 very different performances, but just the way, especially Charlie Wilson's War, just the way he steals the movie from everybody. That performance is, and I love that scene where with his boss John Slattery is, he just what he does in that scene is just classic.
Completely rails on him. Yeah.
I would love to see his True West.
I've been recommending Owning Mahoney just because it's one of those movies that isn't really seen much. I would put Owning Mahoney and Flawless back to back. And challenge people to see the same person. I mean, that's just staggering. And think about that being his first lead performance opposite, what many people consider the greatest actor alive, Robert De Niro. And think about how much he distinguishes himself in that performance.
Yeah,
it's
right.
And again, like not playing the cartoon of it, which a lot of actors would. All right, so thank you guys.